Dan, we've had a regulator that was voicing its displeasure over the last 12 months. Now we have very specific draft rules that have been issued. How monumental do you think are the changes for the technology sector?
The changes so far has been quite surprising because it's a lot faster than what many people had predicted. Obviously, the central government and the regulators are quite disappointed on how those IT giants handle their business, on where the capital are going. So now we're seeing several major laws being released soon and already passed. There's the information protection law, there's the data security law. So the end goal is quite clear. China wants to make a more regulated data market, and it wants to make it clear how companies should use those data in the future. Because data would be one of those things that is similar to labor, land, capital, technology, and it's going to be crucial for China's production and productivity in the future.
Dan, if we can talk about the motivation here, I mean, a truckload of money has been raised in fines lobbed against the tech titans. And if we were discussing this through a European lens, we'd say it's a money-raising activity. It doesn't feel like that is the motivation when it comes to China. Equally, when it comes to what you're seeing between this race to the top between the Chinese and the Americans, the Chinese have been famed for just how quickly they've grown these companies versus American counterparts. Has there been some pushback from the West, do you think, here? Is that the reason why China has scrambled to make sure its regulations are fit for purpose?
Right. Policy uncertainties has always been part of doing business in China. I think investors, global or domestic, are quite aware of that. But when we look at the 14th five-year plan, for example, the long-term vision is quite clear. But when it comes to the day-to-day regulation and how regulators is going to add more laws and rules and standards, it is quite unclear. So it's still this mentality of experimentalism, but this time it is a bit different. And there's a strong pushback from domestic IT sectors as well, because the impact is outsized. Previously, when China experimented with a lot of reforms, including the Shenzhen Special Economic Zone, it was well contained within China. But this time, with this financial and data reform, there's no such thing as a regional or contained change. It will have a global influence. And I think that's the biggest risk to most businesses.
Yeah, and that's actually spot on where I was going to go with this, Dan, actually. Good day to you. Look, we're talking about the deconstruction of the independence of very, very large transnational corporations, very big, successful Chinese private sector entities. Isn't the danger here that actually state-directed, Chinese Communist Party-directed companies and initiatives in terms of which industry are focusing and what the profit motives are just not going to be able to create the same kind of successful international companies?
I think we have to look at this in a longer time horizon, because when we analyze the current IT giants in China, they behave, especially the owner of those companies, they behave very differently from the older generation of the entrepreneurs. And those IT giants, they have made a lot of good changes for China's digital economy, but clearly that's not enough for China's national strategy of creating a more equal society and to resolve the social problems like housing, education, and healthcare. So a lot of those companies are now directed to put more capital into those social problems. And from some perspective, I think it makes sense. Because when we look at, say, Jeff Bezos from Amazon, he was in space. But if you look at Jack Ma or Pony Ma, they're still thinking about creating more of a like e-commerce in grocery to compete with those small sellers or even farmers. And that's clearly not what the central government or local government wants.